Hello and welcome to the How to Play video of Command of Nature presented by Unstable Games. My name is Jesse. I will be your host along the journey today. The intention behind this video is to kind of give you a more detailed look at what setup looks like, what the phases of your turn look like, the anatomy of the cards, and kind of anything else I need to cover to kind of get you going on your first game of Command of Nature. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. As you've noticed here in the video, I went ahead and set up the Droplet faction, which is the faction that I am choosing to oppose today in the video. At the beginning of the game, when you pull everything out of the box, you would actually have the corresponding players choose the factions of their choice. In this case, we would need the players to each, in this one-on-one, choose a corresponding faction. I went ahead and did that to knock that out of the way, but you would get to pick between the four. So what it means by picking a faction at the beginning of the game is you're going to need to grab a couple of components as well. So the first component you're going to grab is going to be your sage board. Each faction has their own that represents their sage that you will be maneuvering in your formation and combat, all that good stuff. You will also have a sage pack that consists of 16 cards in the base game, and you will also find a level tracker token that helps keep track of your level throughout the game as you're leveling up. Once you have those three components sitting in front of you, we're going to go ahead and dive straight into setup. So what setup is going to look like is first you are going to find the level tracker token, which is what I had already pointed out here. You'll slap that there on the level 1 of your sage board. Each sage and or player in this starts out at level 1 and then powers up throughout the game. You are then going to go into your sage pack here, and you're going to find your 3 corresponding faction champions. So each faction or sage pack here will have 3 corresponding champions. You're going to go ahead and pull them out of the sage pack and place them face down on the corresponding spots along the sage board. So something to note about each of these champions is they have a notated level underneath their card title itself, where it'll say, in this case, Calamity Leopard, Elemental Champion Twig, level 8. You will go ahead and take your level 8, flip it face down on your player board, covering up the 8 slot here. You'll take the next one, which is your level 6, flip it face down, cover up the corresponding level 6 spot on the board, and then last but not least is your level 4 champion that will cover up the level 4 slot. The reason we do this is so that way you're not overwhelmed by a list of actions you can't take at this point in the game anyways. So we went ahead and covered them up, and then you'll unlock a corresponding champion and faction action as you are playing throughout the game, which I will cover later. So once you have those set up there, the next step is going to be setting up the formation off to the side, which is this nice little triangle formation here that Droplet has set up. So each of the formations that you're setting up for your corresponding faction in a 1v1 will look very similar to this, where you're going to take 3 basic elementals here from your sage pack. You're going to put 1 down in row 1, you're going to put 2 down in row 2, and then you're going to set this 4th one off to the side for now. So we won't be doing anything with this little basic elemental off to the side here. Same with the champions. They have the title of the card itself notated under the name of the card. So if you ever do get confused, make sure to take a look at those. Next, you are going to go ahead and take your sage. The sage here will be placed in the center of your 3rd row. All sages will have the same daybreak effect to start the game, which is collect 3 gold, as you can see here with Cedar and up here with Torrent. Once you've placed him in the center of your 3rd row here, you're going to go ahead and take 2 of your corresponding elemental warriors that you have left in your sage pack here. In this case, I have Quill Thornback, I have Acorn Squire, and then I have Slumberjack. I'm going to go ahead and, for the purposes of this video, select Slumberjack and Quill Thornback, or Slumberjack and Quill Thornback here, so that way I can kind of show you 2 of the different effect options that you have here. You will take your leftover card that you did not select to flank either side of your sage here in the 3rd row and place it back with the basic elemental card over here. Last, with the sage pack, you're going to take your corresponding instant command cards, attack command cards, pretty much any of the leftover command cards that are left over in your sage pack, and you're going to combine them here here with the leftover elementals. Once you've done that, you should have 7 cards in this little pile here, and this is actually what is going to start your starting deck for the game. So once you've done that, go ahead and give them a nice little shuffle here and place them just to the left underneath your player board is where we recommend, and then we recommend leaving space over here for your discard pile, which is where you'll discard cards throughout the games once you've resolved their effects, so on and so forth. But this is what the play area for each faction should look like once you have set up. It should be a mirrored setup here, where you have the same triangle formation across from you. You have your corresponding elemental champions here on your sage board face down. You have a level tracker token, and then you have your discard pot, or your deck over here. So each one of those will, like I said, have all of those components in play. From there, we're going to go ahead and dive into what it looks like to set up the different markets that we have. And we have 2 different markets here in Command of Nature. So the first one you're going to look at is going to be our elemental market. These are all have kind of unique borders about them, as you can see here on some of the ones that I have in my formation, alongside some of the ones here in the elemental market deck. I left this face up just to give you a quick example. From here, you are going to grab your command market deck, which is where all of your commands that you can purchase throughout the game are located. Same with the elemental deck, or the elemental market deck. This is where all of the elementals that you can purchase throughout the game are located as well. Conveniently enough, in Tabletop Simulator, I have already shuffled both of these decks. So what you'll do once you have your 2 decks separated here of both the elemental market deck and the command market, you'll go ahead and flip them face down. This is to establish the decks themselves, and then from there you're going to go ahead and set up your markets. What that means is taking the top 3 cards of each market, or each deck, flipping them face up, looking something like this. You will have, like I said, we'll have 2 different markets here. We have the elemental market and the command market. They both house different types of cards, so you'll never see elemental cards in the command market, and you'll never see command cards in the elemental market. So this is kind of what a top-down view looks like of the market once you have it set up. You'll notice in a lot of our imagery along the rules, we do have the elemental market set up top and then the command market down at the bottom. It does come down to personal preference. That is just how we recommended setting it up. That's how we play tested it, and we just never changed. So you have those set up now. So we have your faction play area set up. We have your elemental market set up, and now we have the coins, the tokens. The tokens are kind of the last piece of setup here, where you'll take all of the matching tokens, separate them into their own corresponding piles, and you'll set them within reach of all players. I went ahead and just stacked them here. Tabletop is a little bit weird, where as much as I would like to pile them, they stack on their own. So I just went ahead and stacked them, but piles work just fine. Cool. So that is a quick breakdown here of kind of what a table setup will look like. This is with the play mats, of course. I know I didn't say to grab those from your box, but they're not going to be provided with just the base game. They are one of our Kickstarter add-ons as of right now. So, but I do have them here for each corresponding faction, and then our market as well. Okay, so now that I have kind of walked you through how to set up, the last couple notes of setup is, and I won't go into a ton of detail on this because this is actually when the game would take off. Once you determine who goes first, which is determined by the number of houseplants each player has, the player with the most houseplants goes first. At least that's how we have it in the rules. First player would draw up to 5 cards to start kind of with over here. Player 2 would start the game with an additional 3 gold, so the second player gets 3 gold to start the game, and then they would also draw up to 5 cards as well. I'm going to go ahead and draw my 5 cards because it'll help explain the next couple phases here for you of the turn. But before I dive into that, I'm going to go ahead and group these cards real quick because I want to walk over the anatomy of the different types of cards that you'll see throughout, because it'll make understanding the phases a little bit easier. So I'm going to group them set this aside for the time being. This is my starting hand. And I'm going to go ahead and show off a couple of different sets of cards I have here prepared for you. So first off, we're going to cover the different types of elemental cards that you can see throughout the game. I kind of alluded to some of these a little bit where I was walking through where they go in positions within your formation, but I kind of wanted to walk through the unique aspects of each of these. So throughout the game, you're going to start out with basic elementals and elemental warriors. These will also be purchasable through the elemental market as the game goes on, but you'll see a number of these in your Sage pack when you start. You'll actually see all of these in your Sage pack when you start, but these are going to be the main ones that comprise your formation to begin with. So first off, you're going to note that the big difference between these two here, which is the basic elemental here on the right, and then the elemental warrior here to the left of that, is they both have the same stat blocks, right? So you're going to see strength notated in the upper left-hand corner, and then health or hit points, whatever you want to call it, in the upper right. That's the same across the board for each of these different types of elementals. The difference between these two right now is the effect. The effect, you will notice, is never present on a basic elemental. They are more just raw stats, a couple like easy units to bring into your formation that don't affect you all that much once they're defeated, because you're not losing out on any of the effects. Next, you have the elemental warriors that have effects on them, and those come in two different types of flavors. So you have the daybreak effect over here on the left, notated by a sun, and then you have the triggered effect notated by the rotating arrows here. What that means is that if this elemental is in one of the correct rows, which you will see here, so if it is in row 1 or row 2 of your formation when this happens, you would get the benefit of this effect, right? So in this case, it would say when this elemental attacks, collect gold equal to its strength. For you to benefit from that, like I said, it does need to be present in row 1 or row 2 of your formation, which if we're looking at would be one of these first two rows here. Then we have daybreak effect. Daybreak effects are virtually the same thing in regards to triggering from a corresponding row, but they operate a little bit different, where they'll actually trigger during the phase 1 of your turn. So we call it phase 1 in the rule book, but it's pretty much when all of your daybreak effects will trigger. So instead of it triggering like this one when this happens, this would happen as long as this card is present in row 1 at the beginning of your turn. AKA you draw a card if this elemental has at least one boost on it if it's in row 1, and it has a boost on it. From there, you'll notice the sages. Like I said, sages here kind of covered a little bit, but each of the sages have the exact same effect, which is collect 3 gold. It is the main way you generate gold throughout the game. So we went ahead and strapped it to the one card that will remain in your formation for the whole game unless it's defeated, in which case you've lost the game, and then generating any gold doesn't matter. So that's kind of what you're looking at with the elemental cards. I'm going to go ahead and delete these because I have them cloned in my deck. I'm going to grab the last 3 cards here, which is a more detailed breakdown of command cards here. And they also come in a multitude of different types here, ranging anywhere from an attack command, instant command, or a utility command. I'll kind of break down a little bit of what you're looking at here. So instant command cards are going to be similar to interruptions that we've had kind of in some of our other games that maybe some of you are familiar with. The idea is that it will trigger when something happens within the game. So this card in particular says play this card when an elemental in your formation is ranged attacked, reduced damage dealt by 2. So this means that if an elemental in your opponent's formation is ranged attacking an elemental in your formation, you could play this when that attack happens, reducing the incoming damage a little bit. These come in a multitude of flavors, where some of them block melee attacks, some of them block ranged attacks, some of them just block incoming damage, so on and so forth. The next one we're looking at is an attack command. These come in 2 subcategories within the same one, right? So it's the umbrella of attack command, and then they come in ranged or melee. This is a ranged that I'm showing off. I will make sure to show you a melee as well, and kind of what that looks like for each of the 2. I'll do that right after this breakdown here. And last but not least is going to be the utility command. The utility command is typically a way to affect either your opponent's formation or deal direct damage to an opponent or an elemental in your opponent's formation that is going to be a little bit harder to block with instant commands. This one in particular is allowing you to swap the positions of elementals from your row 1 with an elemental in your row 3, which I will walk through that as well. But for now, those are the 3 different types of command cards. Again, I'm going to go ahead and delete these. I have clones of them in the deck already, so don't stress. Okay, so now I've walked through the anatomy of the cards, right? So again, just quick rundown. When you're looking at a basic elemental, main thing you need to pay attention to is its stat block in the upper left and the upper right. Upper left is the strength, upper right is the health or hit points, whatever you'd like to call it. And then with basic elementals, you have the same stat blocks ranging in number from, like I said, the 2/2 that you see up there to 3/4 you see here. But each of the elemental warriors also has an effect attached to it with a corresponding row that elemental needs to be in to take advantage of said effect. And then the elemental champions are going to operate very similar to the elemental warriors. They're just typically an upgraded version of ones that you start with in regards to they have a larger stat block. Most of the time they have an effect that pairs really well with your faction action, which I'll dive into in just a moment as well. Okay, so we've covered setup. We have covered for both your play area, the markets, the tokens. I've gone over card anatomy to help you kind of understand what I'm talking about a little bit more once I dive into the phases of your turn. Something to note here, I kind of hinted at it up here when I was talking about the Sage cards. Something to note, the win condition for the game is to be the last Sage standing. So throughout the game, your objective is to eliminate or defeat the Sage in your opponent's formation. And what that looks like is repositioning elementals throughout the game within here to be within striking distance to deal damage to elementals in your opponent's formation. But at the heart of it, it's trying to keep your Sage from being defeated while defeating the enemy Sage. And then, like I said, don't forget the 3 gold for the second player, along with drawing up to 5 cards at the beginning to start the game. Each player will do that. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my starting hand again here, and I will kind of explain what to look like now as your turn unfolds. So we have a setup established, and now we're going to dive into turn breakdown. So during your turn, you can perform 4 actions. Before you can get to those actions, we need to make sure that we cover any daybreak effects that happen in our formation. So right now, the only daybreak effect that would actually have an advantage for me here at the beginning of my first turn would be from Cedar here in my back row. Again, that is notated here by the corresponding highlighted rows that this effect can be activated from. And that means that because he is present in row 3, I'm going to go ahead and collect 3 gold at the beginning of my turn. So I'm going to take a token here. Something to note about our tokens is they are all double-sided, one side representing a single of that token, the other side representing 3 of that token. So I'm going to go ahead and take a token, flip it face up, put it in my Sageboard wallet over here for future use. This will come into play during phase 3 of my turn. So phase 1, trigger any daybreak effects or activate any daybreak effects. Like I said, Cedar here is the only one that has an active one. Slumberjack, if Slumberjack was present in row 2 at the beginning of my turn, because it is highlighted row 2, I would get to take advantage of that, but to start the game I won't get to. So that's kind of what phase 1 looks like there. Phase 2 is kind of the heart of your turn, where you're going to be playing attack commands, you're going to be summoning elementals, swapping the position of elementals in your formation, or drawing additional cards to help give you the hand that you do want. You can see a quick breakdown of these actions. Almost said faction actions because that's what these are called over here. A list of standard actions that you can perform during your turn. They are indicated here on your player board. For quick reference, we have a more detailed breakdown in the rule book. I will go ahead and read the rule book explanation alongside you guys being able to see this here. And that looks something like this. So again, to reiterate, we have 4 action points that you can spend on your turn. Each of these listed actions here cost 1 action point. You can do these as many times as you would like in whatever order you would like, as long as you have action points remaining. So what that's going to look like here is, for one standard action, you could summon an elemental from your hand to your formation. Something to note about this is that I cannot summon an elemental I do not have space for. So if there's no empty spots in my formation because none of my elementals have been defeated yet, unfortunately I'm unable to summon an elemental here from my hand because there's not a corresponding spot for them to go to. Next, you could spend an action point to play a command card from your hand. Again, those command cards come in a couple of different flavors. The main one that you'll probably be using when you play commands from your hand is going to be a combination of attack commands and utility commands during this phase of your turn, because all of the instant commands, for the most part, are triggered in response to your opponent doing something. So you'll most likely be playing either a ranged attack element, or a ranged attack, a melee attack, or a utility command. Something to note is that there are no utility commands in your starting hands here. Those will all come from the market up here. So what that looks like is you could play an attack command to command your elementals in your formation to do something. In this case, I would be performing an attack command because it's a melee. I would be performing this attack command with this elemental in my first row here. The description of the effect typically walks you through exactly what to look for, but I'll go ahead and run through this one and a ranged attack for you just to give you a rough idea. So this one here says deal damage equal to the attacking elemental's strength to an elemental in your opponent's row 1. What that means, and as you can see here on the close strike, the level 1 or row 1 is indicated just above the description of the card right up here. That means that for me to use this melee attack, I have to use it from an elemental in my row 1. So if I went ahead and did that, his attacking strength would be 2, which means I'd be doing 2 damage to dribble unless Droplet over here had any instant commands sitting in their hand, very similar to natural restoration. But again, like I said, this has to come from a melee attack is performed by a row 1 elemental. For the most part, there are some exceptions throughout the command deck, but your starting ones will always be performed by a row 1 elemental. Next, I will go ahead and find my ranged attack here, which is convenient that is on top. Something you'll notice about this is it operates virtually the same, where it's taking the strength of the attacking elemental and applying that as damage to the defending elemental. The thing that is a little bit different about a far strike versus a close strike is, like I said, close strike is a melee performed from row 1 to row 1. Far strike here is a ranged attack that can be performed from either first or second row, but it has to hit an elemental 2 rows away, right? So if I performed the far strike with my row 1 elemental, I would be targeting either this row 2 elemental or this row 2 elemental. I could not target the front row because it is not 2 rows away from me. If I wanted to target the front row, I would need to perform a far strike with one of my one of my row 2 elementals here. What that would look like if I performed it with either of these two, I could only hit dribble in the front here. I could not hit their row 2s because they would be 3 rows away. Again, these are just the I guess the parameters for the starting attack commands. That is subject to change based upon what you buy from the market. But that is what playing a command card from your hand looks like. The next one is a pretty simple one. It's just swap the position of 2 connected elementals. What that means is you're going to take an elemental maybe here in row 1. Say you wanted to swap with an elemental in row 2. You just swap their positions. What connected means is that there is no elemental in between them and the elemental they want to swap with. So if I wanted to swap row 1 with a elemental in my formation, I could not swap with row 2 in the current state my formation is in, because there are 2 elementals blocking the way. So say I wanted to get Quillthorn back here from the 3rd row up to the front row, I could do that by performing 2 swap actions, where I take the first swap action moving him in Timber's place here, and then I would perform 1 more swap action moving Quill and Timber again 1 more time, because I would have to do it that way because of the connecting elementals in between. Something to note here is that if, say, Oh, I'm not going to note that. I will get into that later when we talk about defeating an elemental. Okay, so I've kind of covered the first 3 actions, and then the simplest but not the least is going to be drawing a card. For 1 action point, you just draw a card from your deck here directly to your hand. Something to note as a little caveat here: if you are unable to draw a card because you do not have an established deck and all of your cards here are in the discard pile or in your hand, what you're going to do is you're actually going to take the cards left over in your discard pile, give them a quick shuffle, and then flip them face down, or flip them face down, shuffle, and then place them here to establish your new deck, and then you would just draw from there whenever you need to. Like I said, don't do this even, so I know it's going to seem weird, but something to note here: do not preemptively shuffle this even though you don't have any here. Only shuffle these when you have to draw, and the reason being is there are some cards that allow you to go through your discard pile to do things. If you have shuffled them already and placed them face down, you'd be unable to go through your discard pile. So only shuffle and reestablish your deck when you absolutely have to. Okay, so now I've covered the 4 standard actions, kind of covered the first 2 phases of your turn. Again, I will give a quick summary here. First phase is the daybreak effect phase, where you're going to be checking for any of your daybreak effects. That's known as phase 1. Phase 2 is when you will spend any of your 4 action points in whatever order you want on whatever actions you want here on your sage board. And then we dive into row 3. Or not row 3, I'm sorry. We dive into phase 3, which is the buy phase. It's essentially where you're going to visit the market. What visiting the market looks like is you get to spend any of your gold here. You get to sell cards from your hand if there's some cards you don't like, generating more gold. Also trimming your deck a little bit when you do that, or refreshing either of the corresponding markets here to see a different array of cards. So I'm sure some of you guys have picked up on the fact that the starting cards have their own unique icon here with a little star icon in the lower left-hand corner. You will never find a star icon card in the market. If for some reason one has been mixed in here, just go ahead and remove it because it does not have a purchase cost. Any of the cards here in the market should always be indicated by a coin symbol in the lower left-hand corner. So again, it happens. If it happens during cleanup, no big deal. Just if you see one, just make sure to put it to the side because it is a starter card, not in fact a market card. So I'm going to grab my gold here from my wallet in case I want to spend anything, and I'll kind of walk you through what that, or buy anything, and I'll kind of walk you through what that looks like. So I can either use the existing gold that I have. Something to note about the gold is that you can store gold from turn to turn. So it's not like if I don't use my 3 gold this turn that I won't ever get to use it. I could use it on the corresponding subsequent turns. So on and so forth. But let's say I have 3 gold to start with. I'm going to assess the market here and see if there's any cards that I want to buy from either of them. Ranged barrier would be a good option. I could buy any of the cards here in the command market. I am a little bit short on buying some of the cards up here in the elemental market. So say I'm looking at these cards. I don't want any of these, even though I have the cost on them. And in fact, I do want, let's just say I want to go ahead and get Splinter Stinger here. What that looks like, because I don't have enough gold, is I would have to sell a card from my hand to generate some additional gold. Any starter card that you sell is worth 1 gold. Any of the other cards that you've purchased throughout the game that maybe you don't find a use for any longer can be sold back to the market to generate a little bit more gold at half of its cost rounded up. So let's say I had bought Rune Puma at some point and I wanted to go ahead and sell him because I'm not getting use out of him. If I sold him back to the market here, I would generate 3 gold for this one because it's half of its gold rounded up, and I could use that to generate or to buy additional cards. But in this case, since I have all starter cards, I would have to sell 2 cards to do so. What that would look like is taking, say I wanted to sell these 2, I'm going to go ahead and return these back to the game box. Unfortunately, I do not have a game box here on Tabletop Simulator, so I'm just putting them off to the side here to indicate that I have in fact sold them. I would grab 2 additional gold coins here, and that allows me to then spend these gold in the market. So these are out of my hand now, or out of my discard pile or deck. They will no longer appear. And then I could spend these on any of the corresponding cards as well. So let's just say I'm going to go ahead and buy Splinter Stinger. A couple of things are going to happen with the purchase of a card. So I'm going to go ahead and take the card here, immediately filling the spot here in the empty spot here in the market. This allows you to buy additional cards that may pop up that you have funds for, if you had any left over. In this case, I do not, because I have spent 5 gold on Splinter Stinger here. I'm going to take my corresponding gold that I spend in the market, put it back in the gold token pile, and then purchased cards actually come directly to your discard pile. So they don't come to your hand, they don't come directly to the formation, they go directly to the discard pile, and then they will be shuffled in with the rest of your cards once you need to shuffle the discard pile. There is a small caveat to what I just said there, where an elemental can be purchased from the market at an increased gold cost of 2. To bring them directly to an empty spot in your formation. So say throughout the game, Slumberjack had been defeated and I did in fact have 7 gold instead of 5. I could have spent 2 additional gold over Splinter Stinger's cost of 5, aka 7 gold, to bring them directly into my formation. That only goes for the elemental cards. You cannot do that with the command cards. That's just the elemental cards there. Okay. The last thing I need to cover here, I kind of alluded to it, would be what refreshing a market looks like. So for 1 gold, you can refresh a market. So that's going to take any cards that are existing in the market currently, grabbing them, flipping them face down, and adding them to the bottom of the corresponding market deck again, placing it back in its place, and then flipping the next 3 cards of that deck. You can do this as many times throughout phase 3 as you want. This offers great counterplay. This offers the availability to see additional cards that maybe if you didn't have a use for the 3 face-up cards and you want to see something else, there are a couple different options you can do with that. But that's kind of the gist of what you can do during phase 3 of your turn. And then last but not least is phase 4. Phase 4 is kind of a traditional cleanup phase where you're going to get the opportunity to discard some cards from your hand if you don't want to use them in your next turn, and then you'll draw back up to 5 cards. Something to note here, because of the way that some of these cards play instant commands as a whole, the reason that we're drawing up at the end of our turn is, so let's say I need to draw my 2 cards, right? So I'm going to draw my 2 cards. This is my hand, right? So I now have 5 cards in my hand. Let's just say that throughout Droplet's turn, I need to use some of my instant commands to either boost my formation up with some of my faction specific commands. In this case is Twig Charm. This says play a card when a Twig elemental in your formation is attacked, add 1 boost to another elemental in your formation. And then I have one that's restoration, or natural restoration here. The reason that the drop happens at the end of your turn is because now if you've played instant commands in response to something that they've done, you actually are going to start your hand with fewer cards. So instead of being able to play additional cards during your opponent's turn and then getting to refresh your hand, it's the strategic play of, do I hold on to these for later use? Do I use them now because it'll limit the cards that I have next turn? So there's a little bit of strategy involved there. But the drawing up to 5 cards does happen at the end of your turn. And like I said, you can discard any cards that you don't want in this phase as well, as long as you end this phase with 5 cards in your hand, is kind of the goal. So I'm going to go ahead and discard those because I don't believe I will be needing my hand for any other explanations right now. Okay, so just to recap, at this point in the video, I have covered setup for a 1v1. I have covered kind of what to expect out of the markets. I've covered the anatomy of the cards. I've covered win condition, and I've covered a turn breakdown, aka moving from phase 1 to phase 4. I've covered the win condition here for you. The last thing to note here that I'm going to go over is going to be, there's a couple little things that happen throughout a turn that you need to be aware of, but they break down pretty easy, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just act like I have played a command card from my hand. It's back to my turn, and I'm going to go ahead and play Close Strike here. So this is kind of the last thing that we have to cover here, I believe. I'll do one more quick look over of the rules just to double check that I have in fact covered everything. Oh, I will cover the tokens as well. I do need to cover the tokens, but we're going to dive into combat and defeating of elementals right now, because abilities that ties into kind of the last little section of cards that I need to cover, and faction actions. So say we're in phase 2 of my turn here. I'm going to go ahead and play Close Strike from my hand, dealing damage equal to the attacking elemental strength to an opponent to an elemental in my opponent's row 1. So we're going to say Timber is striking, close striking for 2. So I'm going to deal 2 damage to Dribble. Let's just pretend that Droplet doesn't have any reaction or instant cards that could reduce that damage. So 2 damage has been dealt. What that means is you're going to look at the amount of damage done and see if it's equal to or greater than the health of the attacked elemental or the defending elemental. In this case, Timber swinging in for 2. Dribble has 2 health, so this elemental would result in a defeat of this elemental. What that looks like is taking the elemental out of the corresponding formation it was defeated in and returning it back to the game box. Couple of things are going to happen simultaneously when this happens, right? So the only thing that the attacking player is going to need to worry about is moving the corresponding card they use to their discard pile and to increase their level tracker along their level tracker. So each time you defeat an elemental in your opponent's formation, you gain a level. While that is happening and the attacking player, the offensive player, is doing that, the defensive player is going to be performing a formation shift. This is similar to, but not the exact same, of swapping locations of elementals, where you're going to first fill the empty spot in row 1. So you're going to take a corresponding elemental from row 2 here and bump it forward. So row 1 elemental has been defeated, row 2 elemental comes up in its place, and then it would leave an empty spot here in row 2. So I'm going to take one of my 3 elementals in the row behind here and slide it into the position that is now empty in row 2. So kind of what it boils down to is you need to have 3 elementals present between your row 1 and your row 2 when at all possible. So I'm going to go ahead and just say we'll move Coastal Coyote up here. Benefit to moving Coastal Coyote up here over, say, Riptide Tiger is that Coastal Coyote offers a level 2 ability here, or an effect here, so it might be more beneficial to move him up to start getting to activate that effect. So I've defeated the elemental. The first thing that you do when an elemental is defeated, just to recap, move an elemental from the row behind it forward if at all possible, and then same thing for any open spots that open up due to the formation shift happening. So it looks something like that. The next thing to note, let's just say we're going to fast forward 2 elemental defeats. Let's say that I have defeated the 3rd elemental of the game with my formation here. I'm going to go ahead and do one of 2 things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the level 4 elemental champion here and add it to my discard pile. You can take a look at that before you do it. You can show it off to anyone else in the game, but it will eventually end up in the discard pile once you've unlocked it. The next thing you're going to note here is that we have unlocked a handy faction action. So the faction actions here on each of the sage boards are unique to the faction itself. So they offer an additional boost to the play style of that faction itself. In this case, it is to add 2 boosts to your row 1 elemental. So what this does, there are technically 2 different veins of actions that you can take during phase 2 of your turn. The first list is going to be the standard actions here that are always present on your sage board, but as you level up, you're going to gain faction actions that you can perform during your turn as well. What that looks like is, say I have this faction action unlocked, I can choose to spend one of my 4 action points to perform this during my turn at any point, very similar to these. The only caveat to the faction actions here are if you have multiple faction actions unlocked, you can only use 1 faction action per turn. So say I use the add 2 boost to my row 1 elemental, I would not also be able to add 1 boost to an elemental in your formation for each connected twig elemental. It'd be one of the 2. And then the only other small caveat with that is I cannot use the same faction action twice. So once I've picked the one I want to use, I'm going to use that 1 action and that 1 action only, and only 1 time per each turn. You can use them multiple times throughout the game, just once per turn. And that kind of covers about everything here, except for the tokens, which I'll go ahead and describe in a little bit more detail here for you. All right, so tokens come in 4 distinct varieties here. Starting on the left, we have the gold coins or gold tokens, whatever you'd like to call them. One side representing 1 gold, the other side representing 3. These are brought directly to the wallet area of your Sage board. From there, we have shield tokens. Shield tokens offer temporary defense to elementals in your formation. And then we also have boost tokens here that offer temporary strength to elementals in your formation when performing attacks. I'll give a little bit more details on both of those in just a moment. And then last but not least, we have damage counters. So damage counters are applied directly to elementals that have had damage dealt to them, but was not enough damage to defeat them. I'll go ahead and use Timber here as an example. So Timber here in my first row is going to projectile blast Coastal Coyote. The damage incoming from Timber would be 2 because it has a base strength of 2. That's not enough to defeat Coastal Coyote here because Coastal Coyote has a base health of 3, but we'd want to go ahead and indicate that some damage has been dealt. So we'd go ahead and throw 2 damage counters on there because of the incoming damage. Okay, so that covers damage counters in a little bit more detail. I'm going to go ahead and cover shield and boost tokens here as well. So we're going to set out a scenario here for the boost token first. So let's say that Timber here has 1 boost token applied to it and would like to perform a close strike against Dribble. We are going to first calculate the amount of damage that would be incoming, and what that means is we're going to look at the base strength here of 2 and then increase that by 1 for each boost token present on Timber. The attack, again, to remind you, does say deal damage equal to the attacking elemental's strength to an elemental in your opponent's row 1. So again, what that means, base strength of 2, increase that by 1 for the boost token, so 3 incoming damage via this attack towards Dribble. Once you have resolved the effect here on the attack command itself, go ahead and add that to the discard pile and then remove any boost tokens on Timber. I'm going to go ahead and add that back to the stack over here. And then I'm going to show you 2 scenarios here for shield tokens. So shield tokens block incoming damage, but I'm going to go ahead and lay out 2 scenarios here for you to show you what that might look like. Okay, so first scenario, let's say Timber here has 1 shield token present on it and Dribble would like to perform a close strike. Close strike is going to go ahead and deal 2 damage because of Dribble's base strength of 2 towards Timber here. So first we're going to calculate that 1 damage is reduced here because we have 1 shield token present on Timber. 1 damage would still be dealt to Timber in this situation, but 1 damage was reduced by the shield token present. I'm going to go ahead and lay out another scenario here for you. So something to note here is just like boost, boost is good for 1 attack, right? So once the elemental has performed an attack, the corresponding boost tokens are removed. That is going to be the same for shield tokens here as well. So anytime damage is dealt to an elemental, even if the damage is not greater than the number of shield tokens present, you're going to go ahead and remove them all anyways. This prevents a player from being able to shield stack here. So in this scenario, let's just say Dribble is performing another close strike again. 2 strength. I do have 3 shield here, so I am going to reduce the damage completely. So no damage is going to come through to Timber, but I am going to go ahead and remove all 3 shield tokens. Again, that helps to stop a player from shield stacking. So they will always block the exact amount of damage coming in as shield tokens present, but they are also removed even if the damage coming in is less than the shield tokens present on an elemental. Okay, so I think that kind of covers everything. I went over the tokens there for you. I won't bore you with cleanup here, but we do appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day to take a look at our how to play video. Hopefully this answers all of the questions that any of you may have had, but do feel free to always reach out to our support if there is something that you would need further detail on, because we'd be happy to assist. Anyways, thank you all. I really appreciate it. It's great interacting with you, and we hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.